What's up, guys? Coming at you from Shenzhen as usual. Today I'm drinking a black tea, Gaoshan Hongcha from Yunnan province, high up in the mountains. There are some people who took some interest in my tea, so I thought I'd mention what I'm drinking today. So, another quick chat about coronavirus and life on the ground here. There are the numbers that I mentioned that were encouraging for Shenzhen. They are still encouraging. Let me straighten this camera out. I've really got to use a different camera. This is really close to my face and it feels like just uncomfortably close. I got to set something up further away. But yeah, anyways, 4 new confirmed cases in Shenzhen yesterday. That is moving really well in the right direction, because before we were seeing 30s, 20s, 10s, and now 4. I think that's the lowest increase we've seen in quite a while. So things are moving in the right direction. The businesses are still closed. I know there's a lot of people who are kind of concerned and worried about that because they are involved with factories overseas who, even though they produce overseas, there's still some components they rely on from China, or people who are Amazon sellers and things like that. And I think it's still going to be a while. You know, I have a friend who's trying to open his restaurant on the 16th or 17th, and he's already planning for it. He's done a post for it. I think he's going to have some problems opening. Technically, he's allowed to open if he follows all of the kind of requirements, but I have a feeling the government's going to give him a hard time to open. You know, the schools aren't back until I think it's like March 3rd or 4th or something like that, and I think the government will try to push everybody out to that day, because what sense does it make to have this partial isolation tactic where part of the city is still keeping itself isolated and not mixing too much, and the others are not? So I'm allowed to open technically also. We received a note under our door at our brew pub, and it said, these are all the things you need to do, and you need to register, you need to apply. And so I will apply, but I don't think I'm going to open that quickly. But I just want to see if we can pass all the requirements. A lot of the things in there, they require you to prepare a bunch of material and a bunch of different things, like alcohol sanitizer. And we're lucky, we already have that stuff because we're a brew pub. We have a bunch of that kind of stuff. But I feel like that's going to be difficult for other restaurants because there's not much of a supply chain going on. There's a lot of people who aren't back at work yet to be able to supply these things. So I'll keep you guys updated on that to tell you what happens with my friend's restaurant if he does manage to open, and what happens with our application process. And I did hear one thing. I don't know if this is true or not, so take it with a grain of salt. But I heard that there was one place that did prepare everything they needed to prepare, and when the government came by to inspect them, one of the things they needed to prepare was masks, and the government took the masks away from them. Again, I don't know if that's true, but that would be pretty crappy. I mean, I don't know if it's because, you know, the hospitals are in short supply and it's more needed there, but that's still not a great situation if you're on the kind of receiving end of that. But other than that, that's what is going on. I think we're, you know, and that March date that I'm talking about, that's still tentative. It depends on what's going on at that point. It may be reevaluated and pushed further. So I don't think we're going to see many people come back to work yet. Other than that, I've just been following. I haven't seen too much of the news here. I just mainly look at the numbers every morning, but I've been following kind of the conversation on social media. That's been an interesting experience. You know, there's a lot of people who they say China's not doing enough to contain this, and they also say, you also hear the conversation that they're doing so much that they're violating human rights. And the interesting thing isn't that there's not much in between. The interesting thing is it's the same people saying both things, which is really weird. I mean, maybe you can make an argument for that, but I found that really weird. And maybe I would be more surprised by it if I hadn't gone through the experience with the whole Hong Kong stuff I was posting about, because the way that it was reported and what was being promoted and advertised overseas, I'm going to use that word for a very good reason, was so different from the reality of what was happening on the ground. And that's what drove me to make a lot of my content and just kind of start doing social media. So it's not really surprising to see some of this stuff, but a lot of irony out there. You know, I saw this one guy, Wayne, let me look at my phone, what was his name? Wayne Allen Root. He's an American politician, and he posted this thing yesterday that I retweeted. I'll just read it to you. So he says, 700 people dead, you want to bet? I'll put it under at 40,000 dead. See a video of Shanghai, a city of 24 million, completely abandoned like after a nuclear strike. You think that happens as a precaution for 700 dead? And I kind of, I took a little bit of a jab at him. I retweeted that, and I said that, I'll read you my tweet also. CDC studies put H1N1 related deaths at way more than 40K. In Wayne's world, logically, China should wait to respond like this only after it looks more like H1N1, and or just use the same American efficiency that was used with H1N1 by not ever doing much at all as it spreads the globe. And so I'm not going to get into explaining that a little bit more, but you can look it up in terms of what some of the CDC estimates are and really what kinds of lack of controls there were in place for H1N1. And then I ran into a YouTube video that somebody sent me on Twitter after that, which was really remarkable. It was of an American guy traveling from China to the US after some of those stricter travel restrictions went in place. And it was really lax. It was pretty much a free-for-all. The customs had closed their windows in the immigration lines to have like a quick emergency meeting. They had no idea what they were doing. You watch the video. I'm going to leave the link in the description. There's a lot of things that are remarkable about that video. But I posted that video also as a follow-up to that tweet, and I said that this video gives Wayne's comment all the context you could ever possibly require. This is the kind of government efficiency and competency that is used as a framework to shape the way he understands how the world works. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that that's how a lot of people are judging the response here. They're looking at the response here and they're contextualizing it in a way in terms of what would be possible in their own country. What would the government do in their own country? And failing to recognize how much bigger of a scale things are done here and how quickly things can be plans can be mobilized. And obviously that's a lot easier when whatever the government says goes, right? But these are some of the things to keep in mind. And actually, on that note, I really want to do a video later on, after this is all said and done, about the takeaways from this event. And of course, I've already spoken about some of the takeaways in terms of China, in terms of the fact that they will, there's some realizations they need to have about the wet markets here, about the communication process in light of what happened with the doctor, and how much more aware people are going to be about hygiene and health precautions here after this. It's kind of just been like education, kind of a supercharged educational event for everybody here. But I think there's a lot of valuable realizations for people on social media right now too. And I don't want to get into it too much because I want to wait till it's all said and done, but I want to mention something up front because it would be really good if people start paying attention to some of these things now, while they're in the midst of this. Pay attention to the people who are taking advantage of your fear and anxiety. Pay attention to the people who are posting super kind of end of the world type predictions about this, and note what were they doing before this, and does it tie into a pre-existing agenda they had? Whether it be YouTubers that always have a largely anti-China sentiment or slant, or whether it be people like Kyle Bass, he seems like a caricature villain that you would think only exists in the movies, you know, so he's gone big on this too. Look what he was doing before. Look at how he was posting about the Hong Kong protests. Look at the fact that he was taken to court before in the US for short and distort campaigns, where he would short a medical stock and then dispute their patent. So people who are waiting on these medicines are basically left without medicines so that he can make profit off of these stocks. And these are according to online articles. You can check it out yourself. And look at his financial website, his fund website, and pay attention to how he's shorting the Hong Kong dollar also, and he has been for a while. As he's been posting things like weird xenophobic things like mainlanders should go back to the mainland from Hong Kong, which is a really weird thing to say. And of course, Hong Kong relies on a lot of tourism dollars and things like that from mainland Chinese. But that's what he wants. He wants Hong Kong to, crash and burn because he has a short open on it. Look at the agendas of these people. Pay attention to who's taking advantage of you. Pay attention to your own sentiment and how much more you want to just hear people fear-mongering on that side of the conversation, and perhaps even get offended by people who seem to take a more balanced approach and say, well, guys, there's some positive things here to look at. Pay attention to your own emotions, because there are some really valuable things you can take away from this as well. And perhaps I'm going into a little bit too much detail here because I want to save this until after. But start looking at the people you're listening to. You know, Solomon Yu is another one. You know, he said despicable things before about, you know, the guy who was lit on fire, who confronted the protesters who were vandalizing the subway system. He's out of the hospital now after 3 months or whatever it is, and still in pretty bad shape. And Solomon was one of these guys, these American politicians, or hopeful, I think. I don't know exactly what he does. But he was one of these guys who says, oh, I heard it's just an actor, and he was just kind of faking it, and they put some fire retardant gel on him. And it's just unbelievable. You see this sorts of things these people say. Even Chen Qiushi, if I've said his name correct, the guy that you know has been vlogging from Wuhan, who's gone silent now. I'll talk about that in a second. Look at what he was doing before. He was covering the Hong Kong protests. He was doing live streams and then selectively editing them after the protest was over to paint a certain picture. He was signing off some of his videos by saying, F the CCP. And that's fine. Say that if you want. But at least it should make you think, oh, maybe this guy has a pre-existing agenda. So now he's been put in quarantine, right? And he's not vlogging anymore. And I mean, let's be honest. Is it really because he needs to be quarantined? It's possible. He was wandering around hospitals and things like that, and the nature of what he was doing put him at a high risk. But in all honesty, maybe it's, you know, it's probably the government silencing him. And keep in mind, there are mechanisms in other developed countries that people have far less of a problem with than China, who do have fake news laws. So it may be because of that, but there's still a problem there because they've apprehended him under the guise of a quarantine if he really doesn't need to be quarantined. So there's problems there. But it's kind of getting away from my point. Pay attention to these people that you're listening to. And what else is there? Let me just see if I posted anything else. I think that's it, really. You know, I'll probably finish off with a video of the Shenzhen Bay Bridge, again, as usual, so you can see what kind of traffic's going on. It looks like there's a little bit more traffic than there was yesterday, but still obviously far less than there usually would be if there was no crisis going on. A couple of quick things I want to mention while I have these images of Shenzhen Bay Bridge up is that in regards to the fear mongers that I was talking about, it's not to say that they don't have valid issues that they bring up or concerns that they bring up, because even though I'm seeing positive progress on the ground here, it by no means means that we're in the clear, because of course the big variable is what happens when everybody starts moving around more after Chinese New Year and all of these companies come back to work. Are we going to have a second wave? This is a real concern. However, nonetheless, still pay attention to how far are they on the side of fear-mongering? How unlikely are they to recognize any possible positives, or how lacking are they of optimism? And perhaps most important, how much does it seem like they're really trying to take advantage of your fear and anxiety at this time, at this moment, in terms of how they're positioning their content? And also look at what they used to do before, as I mentioned. And when you do that, there's actually a secondary realization or epiphany you can have in regards to Chen Qiushi. Because when you look at how he was reporting in Hong Kong before and the things he said before, you might want to ask yourself the question, how was it that he was out and about anyways? How was he allowed to vlog for so long anyways? And this challenges something completely separate, a completely separate topic than just coronavirus alone, which is something I want to eventually do one day, another topic, which is your understanding of China based on how the media presents this and paints this society as an ultra-oppressive society. There's some realizations there when you look at what he did before that perhaps it's not as you have been led to believe. I don't want to get into this rabbit hole too much because that's a super deep rabbit hole, and there's so many more examples I can give you in regards to challenging your thoughts on that topic. And so I think I'm going to wrap it up here before I go a little bit too deep in that. So take care, guys. As usual, take all the precautions you need, and I'll see you in the next video.